Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and this is a follow-up. For those of you that's been a long-time viewer of the channel, you will know that we've been covering Paul Mashatile's expeditions, shall we call them, here in South Africa. It's important to understand that members of the ministry, members of the sort of executive in South Africa, earn just over between a million and 1.2 million rand a year. That in and of itself is actually disgusting, considering that this administration has overseen the complete eradication of the economy of South Africa, and the vast majority of South Africans live on an arm compared to 1.2 million rand a year. But Paul Mashatile specifically is a fascinating little character. You see, Paul Mashatile owns mansions to the tune of 67 million rand. The mansions bought cash, not by him, by the way, and that's where things get really, really tricky. News 24 started their investigation into Mashatile a few months ago. Actually, it's probably a few years ago at this point, but there's a series that's been ongoing on News 24 called Mashatile Unmasked, and effectively, this all stems from a declaration that all of the ministers have to go through, where they have to declare all properties and money that they own and businesses and all the rest. This, of course, is meant to stop corruption. But as we know, in South Africa, that's generally not how it works. News 24 then saw a declaration from the deputy president saying that he owns a house in Constantia, a house in Waterfall, Midrand, Gauteng, and another house in Calvin, Johannesburg, Gauteng. News 24 then rightfully asked the question, oh, wow, like, where did you get the money for this? Because this house is worth 28.9 million rand. How did this happen? Paul Mashatile then hit back with a bizarre defense. People must read. That's just the first thing you must learn in life. There is nothing in Parliament that I said I own a house. I said I live there. That house is owned by my son-in-law. The son-in-law is Nonkwelu, who is married to Paul Mashatile's daughter. Now, here's where it gets really, really interesting. This is all that we saw. This is the declaration of ownership in land and property. Ownership in land and property. And as you will see there, the Constantia House in the Western Cape is there. It's ownership in land and property. He makes the claim he never said he owns it. But then why is it listed as ownership in land and property? That makes no sense. It gets even worse when you realize that Nonkwelu, who is the son-in-law of Mashatile's daughter, no one knows where his money comes from. This is significant because Nonkwelu owns the GPF, or the Gauteng Partnership Fund, which is government-run, and Paul Mashatile was in charge of that fund at the time of the loan, 12.6 million rand. This follows a previous loan that he got years earlier for a project that just turned out to not really be viable. And then by 2017, when the government already knew that this project was not viable and would not continue, they still gave him another 12.6 million rand on top of that. The properties were bought in cash, since on the deeds of the properties we can see that. No one knows where Nonkwelu actually gets his money from, because he owns a couple of service stations or petrol stations in Soweto and a number, I believe, in KwaZulu-Natal. But anyone that has ever known anyone that owns a petrol station will know that they can make a good amount of money, but none of them are buying 67 million rands worth of properties cash. That does not happen. Moreover, there is an investigation currently by the Hawks against Mashatile's son or son-in-law, Nonkwelu, specifically on this. Thanks to the reports of News 24, the DA laid charges at the police, and now the Hawks are looking into it. But of course, if you know anything about the Hawks, you already know nothing's going to come of that, because the Hawks are basically owned and operated by the ANC, who of course is in charge of the government. And this is where we now get to today's story. You see, News 24 filed a request for information under the Information Act of South Africa, which allows for journalists to actually ask for sensitive information to Parliament, saying that they want to see the declaration of properties. news. They want to see that because he declared it. He said he only lives there. That should then be in the official documents. Parliament has denied the request, saying first that they had no such declarations in physical copy. And then when they asked again, they were told that they are not allowed by law, or at least by internal memorandum, to divulge such information since that is sensitive and protected information. The only thing that we have is this little table, I guess you could say. And this is where the ANC as an organization reveals the joke that it is. People still look to the ANC and think that the ANC genuinely cares about poor people in this country. Members of parliament who live in mansions worth 67 million rand do not care about the poor. They never cared about it. Paul Mashatile is in it for himself. And moreover, you have Ramaphosa saying that, oh, we're going to fight the corrupt. We're going to stop the corruption within our own party. But the second in command, Paul Mashatile, a member of the ANC, is currently under stark suspicion, I would argue, of corruption. How in the hell does a man that earns 1.2 million rand a year, how is he able to live in 3 properties worth 67 million rand? How is his son-in-law, who happens to be a man who owns some service stations, get millions of rands worth of loans from the Gauteng Partnership Fund that Paul Mashatile oversaw, and yet the ANC does not make a squeak? That's because the ANC doesn't want to fight corruption. The ANC simply wants to say that they're fighting corruption because the ANC understands as long as they look like they're solving problems, hopefully the voters will continue to vote, because that has been true for the last 30 years. I think we are turning the tide, though. A vast majority of South Africans now no longer favor the GNU, and the majority of South Africans blame the ANC for the failures of the GNU. You see, the GNU, in my opinion, was the watershed moment. It was the moment where South Africans finally realized, hold on, we can vote for someone else, and the ANC can lose the election effectively, but they didn't lose, but they didn't get a majority, and the country doesn't just end. Apartheid just doesn't come roaring back. The DA can be in government, and they aren't just, pushing for apartheid reforms. And I think a lot of people were waiting for that moment. A lot of voters were waiting for that moment and saying, if that happens, what next? Moreover, you saw the MK steal a large chunk of the ANC's vote, and the MK is sort of also imploding. Now, people might think, well, if the MK implodes, people will just go back to voting for the ANC. But that's almost never a given. The first big watershed moment for the ANC came with COPE. And the voters that left the ANC to join COPE ultimately didn't necessarily go back to the ANC. Some would have, but a large chunk of them actually just sort of disappeared into other political parties. And I believe that's exactly what's going to happen here. Should the MK come to a complete implosion, that 15% of the vote share isn't going back to the ANC. And now, especially with where we are now in the world, the ANC continuously makes the worst possible decisions. As always, hit the like if you liked, the dislike if you didn't, and let me know in the comment sections down below what you think of this story. Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members. To become a patron, link in the description down below, or YouTube member, hit the join button right below this video. So always be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.